すごい武器持ってるしか。アカヤの後ろに隠れてしか。カイロウさん、応援してあげるしか。アカヤは全力であなたを守るしか。とできるしか。甘く見ないでしか。また会えたら嬉しいしか。みんなと一緒にいればシカ族の女神ソフィア様も見ていてくれるしか。アカヤはみんなのこと大好きしか。
Hey everyone, this is Nitro Shika. In this video, I want to talk about the way to build the upcoming barbarian loli hero, Akaya Shika. So on a more serious note, I am not going to be speaking like this for the whole video. I can't imagine even trying to. So I'm just going to talk about the way to build Akaya, who is coming up with the next major update on Langrisser Mobile on the international server, which should be coming on April the 2nd. Now, of course, long games could potentially change the order of the major updates as usual, but I don't think that's very likely, so we're most likely to get Akaya and Brenda. Now, I'm going to cover Akaya in this video, and I'll do a video on Brenda later on. So, let's begin. Interesting thing about Akaya is she's actually fully covered in full details on the Wikigrisser page. That's not the case for a lot of the other heroes, so it seems like there is a lot of interest in getting Akaya as a hero. The thing though, I should mention is that Akaya, although she seems amazing, I get the impression that she is really meant more for PvE content than PvP. I'll go into why as I talk about her, but yeah. So, let's begin by talking about her talent, which is actually the most unique aspect of her. The effect of her talent is that whenever a unit dies, any unit, she will summon a wolf spirit next to her. Okay? And the wolf spirit gets the stats of the deceased unit, but the stats cannot exceed 150% of Akaya's own stats. The cooldown of summoning these wolf spirits is 3 turns, 2 turns, or 1 turn, depending on Akaya's star level. And finally, you can only have 1 wolf spirit in play at any time, and the death of a wolf spirit can't summon another one, of course. Last but not least, when the wolf spirit dies, Akaya gets a certain percentage of the wolf spirit's non-hit point stats. So 10, 13, 16, or 20% of the spirit stats. And you also recover some hit points on Akaya, which is equal to 10, 13, 16, or 20% of the wolf spirit's max hit points. The important thing to note about this is I'm pretty sure Akaya can only have 1 stack of this buff, so you can't, keep having wolf spirits die and have Akaya keep getting stronger and stronger, right? If you compare this to, let's say, Sakura, for example, Sakura specifically says she can have a maximum of 4 stacks of the buff after she kills an enemy, right? Akaya has no such mention of this, so it should be every time a wolf spirit dies, she gets a new stat buff where she gets a certain percentage of that wolf spirit stats, right? So in particular, if an infantry character is killed, let's say, then her attack stat will be increased or something, right? And if an intelligence-based character is killed, her int stat will be increased dramatically. So in any case, let's move on away from the talent and talk about the other aspects of her. One thing to note about Akaya is that her bonds are very easy, right? Sophia is an SR, Matthew you start with. So pretty much as long as you get her, you're going to have her bonds unlocked. And from her stats, you can see that as in the Saintess class, she has very, very high attack, while in the Spiritual class, she actually has higher intelligence than her attack value. The reason for this is because if I scroll further down, in her Saintess class, she is actually a Cavalry class character, while in the Spiritual class, she is a Mage class. So as a Saintess, she's going to be 5 mobility melee attacker based on physical attacks, and in the Mage class, she'll be the 3 mobility, 2 range magic attacker, which explains those stats. Other than that, we can see that from the soldier bonuses, her stats there are completely spread out. 25% hit points, 25% attack, 25% defense, 25% magic defense. Very, very odd. There has not been a hero, I think, that's at 25 to everything, but it should be fine overall. So you can see that she is kind of a jack of all trades in that sense. So let's move on. If we scroll further down, let's take a look at some of her skills. Okay, she's capable of bringing quite a few useful skills. One of the ones that you'll most likely bring on her all the time is Blood of the Shika, which allows her to move 2 spaces and attack again right after she uses it. In addition, it has an effect of increasing the lower stat of her attack or int by 50%. And this effect lasts 3 turns. So it's like an act again, you can move 2 more spaces and attack, and your lower stat will be increased dramatically. Very interesting effect, right? Because theoretically, you know, getting plus 50% int, let's say, could make her int higher than her attack depending on how you enchant your Akaya, right? So she could very much choose to bring both magic attack spells and physical attack spells that way, right? If you bring, let's say, Blood of the Shika, bring Dark Reaper, and bring the Javelin skill, she'll have multiple attack skills for both intelligence-based attacks and magic-based attacks. And because of the Blood of the Shika effect, she could actually use both attack types. So it's a very unique mechanic there. Other than that though, you'll probably use Blood of the Shika more for being able to act again to attack the enemy than anything else. You know, even disregarding the lower stat buff there that was mentioned there. Okay. And in addition to being an attacker like this, it should be mentioned that in order for her to attack effectively, I think she will need to have an enemy killed first, which is why it can be a struggle for Akaya to hit hard, right? All the other mages that are considered good generally have a stat increase right from the start to increase their damage, right? For example, Rachel and Lena both have plus 30% damage dealt at 6 stars. Akaya, by comparison, doesn't have anything like that. So until an enemy dies and then her wolf spirit dies, her attack is going to be kind of mediocre, which is a little bit iffy. Which is why, as again, I say she's probably more meant for PvE content than PvP. But moving on, okay? So, we can see Akaya can be both a mage and cavalry class, attack with both physical attacks or magic attacks. And the other aspect of Akaya is that she has a lot of skills that rely on having a wolf spirit on the field. And when she uses those skills, the wolf spirit is destroyed, and then it can grant buffs or special effects. For example, we see here Power of the Wild, right? It destroys the wolf spirit and grants all allies within 3 squares plus 2 mobility, and attack and int is increased by 30%, which is higher than a faction buff increase, and this buff lasts 2 turns. So it's already a very interesting skill right there, right? Extra mobility, high attack for you to continue to assault the enemy. Other than Power of the Wild though, she can also choose to use Roar of Death, which is an AoE attack, right? You destroy the wolf spirit and all enemies within 3 tiles of the wolf spirit receives 0.2 times physical damage and 0.2 times magic damage and are inflicted with 2 random debuffs. So another very, very unique skill, right? Keep in mind that summons now move with the character. So you're allowed to move the wolf spirit forward, then use the skill, Roar of Death, to do damage to the enemies and then inflict them with debuffs. Right? So rather versatile AoE attack right there. And then finally, the other very useful skill Akaya has is Beastly Outbreak. Probably one of the most useful for her, I think. It's an assist skill, which can only be used when the wolf spirit is on the field, of course. But what it does is it destroys the wolf spirit, and it does transfer 1 allied unit to the location where the wolf spirit was. And if that unit has acted already, it gets to act again.
甘く見ないでしか
So it's a massively powerful spell because you're basically teleporting a character that has already acted forward and they can attack once more. So we can see here that with, of course, the main drawback of this Beastly Outbreak is that while she herself can keep summoning wolf spirits like pretty much every other turn, the cooldown on a skill like this, Beastly Outbreak, is 3 turns, right? The cooldown on Roar of Death is also 3 turns, and the Power of the Wild is also 3 turns. So it may not be that easy for her to keep using these spells because of the cooldowns factor. So overall, you can see that Akaya is a very, very powerful support character, and she could potentially be a powerful single target striker in PvE content. The drawbacks, of course, is in order to use any of these skills, something has to die to create the wolf spirit. Which means that in order to use Akaya, you're probably going to need another summoner. You know, let's say, for example, Gizaroth to drop constructs or something similar. And that's not easy, right? Getting both Gizaroth and Akaya will be very, very tough, especially since they share the same mythical realm faction. You know. In addition to that, Organs of Light doesn't really have any summoners, neither, to my knowledge, this Legion of Glory. Most of the summoners seems to be in, let's say, Bozol, Lena. I suppose you can say that Liana can drop summons as well, right, with Sky Archers. But basically, if your enemy is careful and prevents you from summoning anything, Akaya may have a very, very tough time being used in PvE, or sorry, in PvP. And as a result, that's why she's not considered a top tier PvP character. In fact, I was browsing through the Chinese version of YouTube, Bilibili, and I could not find a single video of Akaya in action in PvP content. So you can see kind of right there that she's probably not considered top tier at all. You know, the only video that I've seen of Akaya in PvP content is actually Sweet Dango using her on the Chinese server. But I digress. So the only things left to talk about for Akaya would be her soldiers, her equipment, and then her enchants. So let's begin by looking at the soldiers that Akaya has access to. So soldier wise, we can see from here that she has Bone Dino, Vampire Bat, Wizard, Stone Colossus, Spider Demon, Treon, Guardian, and Scorpions. So let's jump into the game quickly to talk about these soldiers. Or maybe I can just talk about them right here as well. So, realistically, of all of these soldiers, you're likely to only have the Vampire Bats leveled, and that would be if you are using your Akaya in her Cavalry class, right? What should be mentioned though is that I'm actually going to jump into the game here at this point because there's a few things that I want to mention with regards to soldiers. So, what we saw was that she has, in terms of 5 mobility soldiers, she also has access to Bone Dino, Spider Demon, and Scorpion, right? So, the Scorpions are one of the new soldiers that can move, I think, very smoothly in desert, sand dunes, and caves, but there's no real, truly good reason to level them up, at least in my opinion. The Bone Dinos are arguably the hardest hitting of the bunch, right? I think they get plus 45% attack as long as they're at above 80% hit points. But combining a cavalry character with cavalry soldiers is a nightmare if you ever run into a Lancer class opponent. The final 5 mobility soldier is the demon unit, the Spider Demons. But the Spider Demons actually have 2 range, not 1. You see. So Spider Demons could work in the sense that, after all, they do magic damage, and they also can reduce the enemy's mobility, as well as reducing their magic defense value. So potentially they can hit quite hard. But the problem is that they have that 2 range. So unless you bring that skill that increases their secondary stat by 50% so that their int gets increased dramatically, and then you bring, let's say, Dark Reaper to attack the enemy, it's not recommended to bring the Spider Demons. But the fact that it can actually work with Akaya, Spider Demons on a melee class cavalry soldier or cavalry general is actually quite interesting, right? So those are, and last but not least was the gargoyle? No, he doesn't have access to gargoyles. Never mind. So that's actually all the 5 mobility soldiers that he has, Akaya has access to. There's 2 cavalry ones, the vampire bats, and then the spider demon. Of those, I would say the vampire bats and the spider demons are the most usable ones. And then moving into her mage class, in truth, the mage class would only have 2 soldier choices. First is once again the spider demons, because they have 2 range and 5 mobility. Being a demon class, they can reduce enemies' magic defense so that you can hit harder. The other option is the wizards, where they would, at level 10, they would provide plus 30% attack and magic defense when you're attacking. It's not as good as the sorceress, who gets plus 45% attack, but at least you don't have to be at full hit points to get this benefit, right? So there's only 2 choices if you decide to go into the mage class with Akaya. It's either wizards or the spider demons, right? Because the remaining soldiers for Akaya are actually lancer class soldiers. I think she gets Treant Guard for some reason, and then she gets, I think, Stone Colossus. So overall, a rather odd mix, right? Of those, you can say there's really just 3 soldiers that are truly usable: vampire bats, wizard, and spider demon. Alright, so with these soldiers talked about, let's now move on to talk about her equipment. And because she has both cavalry class and mage class, her gear, she has 2 completely different sets of gear. So just give me a moment to bring that up, and that will basically be the last part of this video. So I'm gonna have to bring up both cavalry gear, optimal cavalry gear, as well as optimal mage gear. So why don't I start with the cavalry gear first and then talk about the mage gear next. Right? Cavalry gear wise, it's pretty much identical to Leon. There will be more options than the ones I'm covering right now in this part of the video, but I just wanted to go over the options that I see would be the most likely. Okay, so in terms of weapon, Steel Guardian is probably the best, followed by, you know, either the Frost Rend or the Last Knight. Those 2 are much more common and much more likely to be equipped, but you can also have a Steel Guardian. Armor wise, I don't think there's really a best option in terms of armor, but I would say Aeolus's battle armor, then Bloodline Limit Magic armor or something like that, Bloodline Magic armor, and Aeneas's armor for the most common one. Right? Helmet wise, you would probably want the Hand of Tyr if you're in the cavalry class, because that way your single target strikes and counterattacks would do more damage. But also viable is a Chief's Helmet to, let's say, have Shika or Akaya buff up the tank, and then Aeneas's armor, Aeneas's helmet for the extra hit points and defense would always work for a more common option. Accessory wise, there's a lot of choices. You know, I said Overlord's Badge may be the best one, followed by Slayer's Emblem, followed by Winged Shin Guards. But in truth, any attack accessory pretty much can work here, as long as it's not one that requires you to either be completely isolated from your allies or, you know, right next to them or whatever. And in addition to that, while I listed 3 armor choices, the other armor choices are viable. Like, let's say mirror armor you can equip, you know. There's so many options for armor. I just listed 3 of them. Right? And I think this would be the more common options in terms of equipment for Akaya in a cavalry class. I mean, generally speaking, this is the type of gear you see on everybody's cavalry class characters. So, moving on, we will talk about the mage gear then. Mage gear really has not changed for anybody. Like, Lana has shown mage gear in general, or Rachel for the matter, and everyone really wants this exact same stuff. Every single mage, right? Best gear is generally considered to be Red Moon, Tenyo's robe, Tenyo's headdress, and then the Holy Ring, because the anti-silence is so important for PvP content, right? But then secondary gear could be things like a Blue Moon, Baldur's White Robe, so you can do melee counterattacks potentially at full damage. A Dark Crown, because if you can't get a Tenyo's headdress, you might as well just have something that gives you a lot of hit points. And then, in this case, I said Star Earring, because Star Earring can provide you some additional protection against archers and assassins. Right. But then there's always other choices, like for example, Galaxy Cloak gives 10% hit points and 5% magic defense. That's a very viable alternative to the Baldur's White Robe. And really, any other in-space accessory could work here, rather than just like Eye of the Beholder would work. The list goes on and on. So I just thought I would show some examples of top-tier mage gear here, that are viable. But at the end of the day, if you're doing PvE content, you could truly use just any set of SSR gear and you won't have a problem. Rather than the gear being the issue, it's more likely that having good enchants on that gear will be the issue. Right? And then last but not least is the enchant, which I will suggest to be Breeze. Right? The reason for that is clocks won't really work for Akaya. Akaya has a lot of support skills, and clocks does not activate for support skills. It only works for skills that you use to attack. So that kind of knocks clocks out of the window. So then there was the choice between Full Moon and Breeze. I personally prefer Breeze in general, because Breeze, that +2 mobility, can be so incredibly useful. But you could very easily use Full Moon and be happy with and satisfied with that too. And there we have it. So that's everything I wanted to cover with regards to Akaya. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found this video useful. And on that note, Nitro out.